this is what I'm going to show you how to make in this video. To go along with this video, you can get all of the samples, MIDI, presets, and the project file for this template that you just heard. It's all available at the top of the description. Don't miss it. Definitely go there and grab it. Also, check out my custom tutorials and my ghost productions if you guys want to learn from me or get a track produced. Link for that is in the description. Definitely don't miss out on that as well. And yeah, let's dive in. So, we're at 134 BPM. Pretty standard for this style. I was trying this a little bit faster. I think like the mid 130s or like maybe like 125 up to like 137 is kind of ideal for the style. And the first thing we got up here is the snare, which is actually 2 snares. And I'll play it with the rest of the drums so you can kind of hear. So, what's happening here is when you hear this, it's basically taking 2 different samples, right? We have one which is doing every first snare, and then one which is doing every second one. And you can see, yeah, it's just like this nice snare rim shot thing with a bandpass filter on it. And what happens is they're honestly pretty close texturally. Right? But you can hear when you get that second snare, it's almost like it sounds like it's the first one with like some kind of automation or processing on it. And that's basically what this is. You're going to see this even deeper later when I show you the kicks and the hi-hats. But basically, a lot of what you're hearing with the percussion in the style, when you hear it and you go, wow, like, there's a really interesting texture and it sounds like it's evolving and changing on the sound. A lot of times, it's actually just because it's 2 sounds that are very similar and very well placed, right? Like, if you replace these, like, if you put this second snare first and the first one second, it wouldn't be as good of a groove as this is. So you really want to keep that in mind. And it's more sample selection than anything. The only processing here is the bandpass on the second one, which also that can give you a good kind of like rim shot like you're trying to get with the style. But also it's like the pitching. You can see I pitched this down -9. That does a lot of it as well. So then we have all the hi-hats. So, I'll just break it down. So, the first thing here would be this tambourine. Which, if you guys recognize it, it is from the Think Break, actually, which is a very famous drum and bass and jungle drum break that was used. Yeah, I literally just took the tambourine, put a little bit of erosion on it, and this just gives you like a steady background thing, because if you don't have this, like if you only have the programmed MIDI ones, it's a little bit too rigid. This gives you something more organic in there that really like ties it all together. So we got that. And then the next one would be these. Which what's happening is it's this like kind of hi-hat groove. I have a few different hi-hats here. Where you can see it's 4 different tracks, but actually it's 6 different hi-hats. So we got 3 in this drum rack and 3 in here. And yeah, they're all kind of grooving off of each other. And then it's going through a bit of filter delay. But to kind of control that, because typically you wouldn't want a lot of delay on your percussion. Like with this style, you're going to get kind of far away from that like classic future garage sound that you're probably going for if you start to use too much delay. So what we're doing is we're filling in some space with the delay. But then there's this auto filter here with a little LFO on it. So it almost just kind of like creates like the repeats from the delay, and then the filter makes it all kind of fit together as one thing. And then there's a bit of drum bus. And that's this. And then the last element to the hi-hats would be these 2. Which you can hear just sit really nicely over that last one I showed you. and just give you a little like punctuation. Like, you know, it's kind of like you have your like sentence, but then these are like the period or the question mark or the exclamation point. And you can hear how that really fits in there. And then you add in that one. And there you go. So then we have the kicks. And what's happening here, so it's 4 kicks. Obviously you can hear, this is a pretty busy little rhythm. Honestly, you can make a beat out of just this if you wanted to. But what's happening is, so we have like our main one, which is this. Just like a steady boom on every whole note. Plus we have these little guys kind of dancing around there too. So playing with the kick at different pitches can give you like a very organic sound, because it sounds like it's a different percussion, but you're generating it out of what's already there. So it kind of like, yeah, it really creates like this nice organic thing. And also you can see there's no processing actually on any of these kicks except for the little high pass on these other two, which I'll explain. So it's not about some magical processing chain. It's the sample selection. Then we have this thing, which you can hear. That's just every 2 bars to get that like. And it's important with this that you have your main kick is like a shorter, like a. But then this is just this, like longer things to get like a. Like that. You wouldn't get that if this was also like a shorter sample. And then we have these two, which sound kind of crazy on their own, but yeah, when you put them with the others, you can hear it just really fills in that beat. Again, it's just these 2 kicks. We're pitching them around to get a bunch of different hits out of it, and then also high passing them so that they don't get in the way of the main kick or the bass in the track. And then the last drums that we have down here are these little Foley sounds, which these are the ones which when you play them on their own are going to sound the most like random. But like if I play it with the kick, you can kind of hear it. And I'll put on the snares too so you hear how it fits in. So you can hear it's adding obviously a few different things. 1, really nice texture. 2, some extra background percussion, because without this, really, we just have hi-hats, some snares that just each play 1 every bar, and then some kicks. We don't really have any mid-range percussion, so this serves that purpose. But also, it kind of takes us a little bit off the grid, because if you look in this, you can see, like, these hits aren't really right on the grid. Like, you know, we're getting things, like, kind of here and there, like, in different moments, and it's not completely random, right? Like, you can see it fits into the grid. But then, like, here, for example. Like, this is not, like, right on the grid right there. You know? But that's fine. Same thing here. Like, or even like this, you know? But that's what gives you, like, more life. And what you're going to do is basically take these little chunks of this, and you can just move them around in the arrangement here. And you want to get like, you want to get them kind of talking to each other. Like, you don't want to just have these all playing at the same time. It's like, oh, here's this one, and then it goes into that other one. Like how you get this, where they're playing together. And then that last one is like, you know, it's also where they're sitting in the mix. Like this one is really just in the high end. You can see I've got a band pass on that. So it's more than just like, you know, recording Foley. It's also like understanding like what's gonna fit in, like finding that mid-range percussion, like I was just saying. So then we have the pad. So we're in the key of C minor here. What we're doing, chords wise, regular root note, which is this C minor chord. Then the major 6th chord, which is confusing because technically it's a minor 6th, but it's a major chord. Then we're doing a 4th, which is another minor chord, and then another 6th. which if you look at the root notes, like you can see in the respace, so it's actually a very simple progression, right? But then what's happening is these melodies in here where like, okay, for example, like we have those root things happening where it is those root notes, but then there's also like, you know, like that, or like, or even, you know, it's all those little melodies. Because when you hear these pads, essentially, okay, like, everyone wants to know what makes, like, the burial pad so cool. Well, yes, the fact that it's sampled, I also wonder, like, how often those are sampled and how often it actually is just, like, you know, he might really just know what he's doing with the keys and then making it sound sampled. But I think what it is it's basically this idea of, like, musical texture. You have the chord progression, and that is defined in a way where you can clearly tell what it is, but it's not always, like, just the chords. And it's not just like, you know, oh, this is this basic minor triad, then a major triad, then a minor triad. Like, it's like a very, like, again, it's more like musical texture. Like, thinking of these notes, like the way this melody, that's texture on top of your chord progression, right? Because of how those notes will interact with the root notes that you have. And that's essentially, if you want it explained in like 2 or 3 minutes, that's what it is. And that's why, like, again, like, you're gonna try to go and, oh, well, I did the root chord and I did the major 6th chord and I did that minor 4th chord, but it's still not sounding. Well, again, it's because it's that juxtaposed against these other things happening. And again, not always, like, even defining that chord progression really beyond the root notes. I mean, here, like, we have, for these first 2 chords, like, those 2 chords fit into what those chords should be, but, or those 2 notes do. But other than that, like, you know, it's kind of breaking the chords, but just having that really defined progression. So for the sound here, it's operator. We've got this FM pad, which is a sine wave, and then 2 more sine waves with just different, they're just in different octaves. I've got a low pass filter, which has no modulation on it, actually, but you can see there's an LFO a little bit on the pitch, just giving it that, like, warble. We have this reverb, which you can see is almost completely wet, and that's actually a really good texture tip, right? Because you can see we don't need a whole bunch of saturation or anything, but this sounds nice and, like, you know, textured and unique. And it's essentially just from taking this, like, a pretty flat sound if you think about it. Pretty simple. And then just putting that, like, almost completely wet reverb. And it becomes something new. It becomes more of like that, you know, it almost reminds me of like the Aphex Twin ambient works, like that kind of like ambient texture. That's what you're going for. And then a high pass filter. Then we have the bass. So this bass just follows the chord progression that I described before. And that's also part of what's really helping define that underneath the melody notes too. And then for the sound, it's a pretty simple respace. It's made with analog. We got 2 saw waves, detune, low pass filter, the amp envelopes like that, a bit of unison, and then this phaser, which might sound a little bit crazy, but it gives a nice movement to the bass. And when you hear it in the whole mix, like, it gives it so that the low end, like if the low end, that's another tip to making Future Garage. If the low end is just like a flat sub note, like let's say you did like a 1 saw wave, no detune, and a low pass filter, there's gonna be something missing. This phaser and the detune combined are making it so that low end is just like really moving around. And that really contributes to the atmosphere when you hear these tracks, like why it feels the way it does. So then we have these vocals. So what's happening is it's basically these 3 different samples, and then I've got, it's really just putting them in key, like that's all it really comes down to, like, and just having it interact with what's happening in the chords Also, it's these little things here, like where I chopped it, and you can actually just take like one syllable and pitch it differently. And the secret to that is doing it always on a quarter note. You see right here is where that split is, and then if you look, like this half of the clip is a different pitch from this half. Over here, same deal. The chop happens on a quarter note because that's what's gonna make it feel like it's really like fitting into the beat, and also like so that it's not just all over the place. Like it still is kind of like together while feeling very like chopped. And then of course everybody wants to know, well, how do you get the magical vocals? You know, what's the secret processing? I'll give you a secret. It's just reverb and a low pass filter. It's a really subtle low pass where you boost the resonance and you just cut out like the high highs. Here's what it sounds like without this. And then with it. See, it just gives you that little bit of lo-fi, because that's essentially what a lot of these lo-fi things do. Like, if you buy some magical plugin that's doing that, well, you ask yourself, like, okay, so what is the lo-fi sound? Well, it's essentially this, like, subtle low-pass filter, with other things, of course, you know, compression, saturation. But, like, at the end of the day, that sound is just made by, like, a very subtle low-pass filter. So it's like, why can't you just do that with auto-filter? We got that, and a little bit of reverb. That's the only, like, tape saturation plugin you need to really get these vocals. If you have the right samples, this will be more than enough. Then the last thing we have is just a bit of atmospheric noise. You know, that background feature garage kind of texture. And that's it for this one, guys. So I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project files, samples, MIDI, presets. The entire template is available right at the top of the description on my website. Definitely go grab that. I really appreciate all the support, guys. It's not just about me. It's also about supporting you guys. It's a very accessible template to get started today making this music. You know, I have not seen anything else on the market that got this close for an actual like template that you can open, and especially like at this accessible price. So don't miss out. Link is at the top of the description. Thank you so much for the support, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.